And I got to hear a couple of really great speakers this week. And so I wanted to really just R&D a lot of the stuff that they had. For some reason, let's see, Heather, are we recording?
Okay, not on purpose, no.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's
no,
recorded.
I got it. I do record, Heather, so we can post it. I mean, Heather Sanders, so we can post in our group. Okay. Great. So I want to get back to our gratefuls. And this week I have needed it the last week. I don't know about you guys. But what is one thing that you are specifically grateful for today? And so type it in the chat, one thing you are specifically grateful for today. And I'm going to be honest, over the last week, the one thing I'm really grateful for has been mentors and wiser people than me. Really wiser people, because we've had a lot of stuff going on, and honestly sometimes you don't know the right things to say, and you don't know how to lead people or how to even talk to your family or your friends during some of this stuff. And so I'm super grateful for wiser people like John Maxwell and Andy Stanley and Chris Hodges, who I watched this week, and several really great pastors who man, they have a lot of wisdom, and so I have just R&D'd all of their stuff. Oh yeah, Pam, that's a good one. Work, yep, just distraction, totally, yes. Hey, Blair Bishop, grateful for great and supportive coworkers. Yes, awesome.
Hi, Dana.
Same mentors. Hi, Blair. Oh, Steph, hey. Resources, yep, working to educate myself more than usual this week. I think everyone is very similar in that regard. So yes, that is definitely one thing. Oh, Abby, fun things on the schedule to look forward to. Yeah, I think we were not going to do a vacation this summer, and now I'm like, we're going on vacation this summer. So yeah, I think it makes a big difference. Okay, so here are a couple of things that I wanted to share. I don't know if any of you watched this, but John Maxwell did a Facebook Live on Monday this week, and he had Simon Sinek on, and I love Simon Sinek. And so I wanted to share, I've got a couple different things to share. So the first one is he talked about, and we've heard this several times, but a crisis is the great revealer. And we've had some crisis lately, right? And so it reveals how we deal with stress. It reveals our relationships, our money, our spouses, our emotions. It'll also reveal the players versus the pretenders. And this is where this one really struck me. And I loved when John talked about this, because he said players go to where the needs of the people are. And you guys may even be able to think of somebody who, or people in general, who this crisis, you've seen a different side of them with everything going on. And so, yeah, it's been interesting. So players go to where the needs of the people are. So you have to pivot back to your foundations and to your why. And so here's what he talked about in a crisis. So, and honestly, guys, I think right now, I don't know, we were just talking about the pandemic, and now we have so many really important things going on in our world. So you show up with empathy first and foremost. You show up with empathy. In a crisis, that's what all great people do first, is they show up with empathy. Second, our values are your foundation, and they really shouldn't change. And then this was the part that for me really struck a chord. Get to the root. And he said, that's what listening is. And they talked a lot about listening. And some of you guys may say that you are a great listener. And some of you, like me, you maybe have had to work on that. So he said that for the other person to feel heard is someone actually listening. And here was a big one. And I highlighted this with two different colors. You don't get to decide to be present. You are present when someone says you are. And so I want to share a little example around that. So Adam and I had date night dinner last night. Blair, I saw you did too. I hope your Jeff Ruby's was good. I'm jealous. That's where you went. We had, because I was heading back to Kentucky today. And he stayed in Charleston. So we had date night last night at one of my favorite little places to eat in Charleston. And I thought I was doing really good because I didn't have my phone. I had my phone, but I wasn't looking at my phone. I didn't have it out. I had it upside down, underneath of the table. And so I felt like I was being very present. And so in the middle, he said, I was actually waiting for him to say, man, you're not on your phone, or you don't have your phone. And so he said, you're not here. What's going on? I was like, what are you talking about? Because normally I'm on my phone. And I really felt like, guys, I was being present. And he said, I feel like you're just not present. And I said, what do you mean? I have no distractions. Like, it's just us here. And he said, yeah, but I can totally tell you're thinking about something. And he on one of my businesses right now, and it was just weighing heavy on me. And even though I thought I was present, because normally my phone is my greatest distraction, in full transparency, he didn't feel that I was being present. And so I remembered instantly what John said on Monday. You don't get to decide to be present. You're present when someone says that you're present. How good is that? I was like,
you're cutting out a little bit, Dana. She'll be back in just a second.
Heather, it's all you.
Oh no, I have no idea what she's talking about. So we have to wait for her.
I just jumped on. Oh, we lost her. Oh, there you are.
I'm back.
There she is.
Okay, sorry guys. I knew that was gonna happen. I was afraid that was gonna happen. Where did you lose me? Did you get to hear my story, Troy?
No, you're talking about being present.
Oh shucks. So you didn't get to hear about last night?
Not very much.
We heard a
only
little
got
bit
the
that you were
gist.
not present, and you remember John Maxwell saying that you're present when you're being told that you're present.
Okay, well, I'll just, man, that was I talked for a long time then. Okay, so Heather, text me, or somebody text me if that happens again. Okay, so here's what he said. You don't get to decide to be present. You are present when someone says you are. So just to recap really quickly, last night, Adam and I had date night. We went to dinner because I was heading back to Kentucky, and I felt like I was going to get, like, praised because I felt I was being very present because I did not have my phone. And in the middle, Adam said, I don't feel like you're here. Like, I don't feel like you're being present. And I was like, what do you mean? I don't have my phone. Like, I'm not distracted, because normally my phone is my greatest distraction. And he said, I don't know. I can just tell. I feel like there's something going on. And honestly, he was right. I was present. I felt like I was, but I was also thinking about something that was going on in one of my businesses, and it really was weighing on me, to be honest. And so even though I felt like I was present, he could totally, he said his feeling was I wasn't present. And so I instantly related to this quote that John said on Monday: you don't get to decide to be present. You're present when someone says that you're present. And I was like, man, that is so true. So here's what he said. You don't listen well when you value what you want instead of valuing what the other person wants. So you have to listen and then learn and then lead. And so he said followers, and you could think of followers as your peers, your coworkers, your clients, your friends. Anybody around you only want to know three things. Do you like me? Number one. Number two, can you help me? And number three, can I trust you? And I feel like that's such a great reminder. And John has talked about that for as long as I've been following John Maxwell. And it's just the best reminder every single time for us to think about. And honestly, the only way that normally those three things happen is when you listen, and you really listen, instead of what does Linda McKissick always say? A lot of times people, when they think they're listening, they're just waiting for their turn to talk. And so so that one really hit me. So I just want to, this was my biggest aha. You don't get to decide to be present. You're present when someone else says you are. So I want to just make sure that you guys really heard that. So also this week, I got the privilege of actually listening in on one of Adam's really great calls that he's on with his, I call it his boy group. It's called Go Abundance. And and a guy named Ben Hardy was on. He's written several books, but he talked about the psychology of your future self. And he shared some stories from Dr. Daniel Gilbert. I had seen one of his TED Talks. If you've never watched Dr. Daniel Gilbert's TED Talk on the pursuit of happiness, I think it's called, he's got like over 3 million people have viewed it. And it's really great. But here's what he talked about. Ask yourself this. So just for fun, I want you to type in the chat. Are you the same person that you were 10 years ago? Yes or no? Would you say you're the same person that you were 10 years ago? And for most of us, the answer is going to be no. Almost everyone says no, right? But here's the crazy thing. We still think that we'll be the same in the future. So we tend to believe that the person that we are today is the person that will always be. We tend to believe that the person that we are today is the person we'll always be. And so what that means is we don't really take enough time to imagine our future, or sometimes we might even assume that we'll be less than we are today if we think about where we're going to be in the next 10 years. But the reality is that none of us would say that we are the same as that we were 10 years ago. I don't know about you guys. I sure as heck am not the same as I was 10 years ago. Yeah, several people saying absolutely not. No way, no. Yeah. Science of Happiness. Blair, thank you. Blair posted in the Zoom chat. That's the link to the TED Talk. And it's really, really good. Honestly, I've watched it numerous times. I've seen it at several conferences. So I would encourage you guys to watch that. So when we think about, he talks about your future self, you have to really think about what your future self is going to be like. So Ben said, if you are imagining your best future self, how would you be different than you are today? Because we know we're going to be different in 10 years. We know we're going to probably be different in 5 years or 3 years or maybe even 1 year. So how would you actually be different than how you are today if you were imagining your best future self? So some of you may have heard of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. A lot of leadership conferences will talk about that. So Dr. Carol Dweck is actually the lady who she came up with a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. She's the doctor of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And so they shared this that I thought was really powerful that I wanted to make sure I brought to you guys. She said, fixed mindsets are defined by the now, and growth mindsets are defined by yet. And so if you think of somebody who you feel like is very stuck in the now, and maybe they have a fixed mindset, it's because they're worried about today. They're worried about the now. People who you would define, or who I would define as, man, those are people are really growth-based. They have such a growth-based mindset. They're always thinking about growing, kind of like that page that we studied in the 5-year book, where no matter if you're 4 years old or 104 years old, those people had all accomplished something at every age because they had a growth mindset, and that's defined by the yet. So your future self is way more important than your present self. It's best to view yourself as your future self, not what the you right now wants, she talks about, because really it's totally different. Sorry, I have a ton of noise. Hang on, guys. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So basically you're making decisions on your future self preferences. And then here's the key part. And I had to like rewind this several times when I was listening to this. Because what happens is you make decisions based on your future self's preferences, then you engage in deliberate practice. So here's kind of what Dr. Carol talks about. You have to have a targeted focus towards a specific goal. Then the goal then shapes the process. So for example, they told us a great story about LeBron James. So LeBron James said that his future self, his big goal is he wants to be the best basketball player in the whole entire world. That's what he wants to do. So because that's his targeted focus on a specific goal, the goal then shapes his process of probably becoming MVP player of the year, and all the other what we would think would be great big awards, but to him, and they are, and to him, he doesn't see them that way because he's focused on being the best basketball player in the world ever, period. So his big targeted focus of his big goal is actually shaping his process, and it's kind of pulling him through all of those other goals. So then she talks about this, and I really want you guys to kind of think about what peak experiences you have. We're going to talk about this. I have not read this book, full disclosure. However, they shared it, and she said that a lot of this that she talks about leads into peak experiences. So there's a book called Peak, and I put a picture of it just in case anybody wanted to know more about it. But peak experiences actually open your perspective. So being in a peak environment does the same thing too. And you kind of have to really think about this. You have more latitude in what's possible. So think about maybe when you're in an environment that is like lack-based or maybe fixed mindsets, and you aren't necessarily, you're not at your peak because you aren't in a peak environment. And so here's what she talks about. You have to put yourself in extreme learning situations and not be stuck in your comfort zone. Don't you guys feel like the older that you get, the less, and some of you may not, then I think the normal is the older you get, the less willing you are to take risks or to put yourself in peak experiences where you actually are like totally getting out of your comfort zone, or you're doing something that is scary, I guess, for lack of better words. So I really would love for you guys to maybe type in the chat if you've done something lately that you feel like you really put yourself in a peak environment, or you had a peak experience. So some of you know this, but I have a massive fear of flying over long, big bodies of water. And so in November, when I went to London with John Maxwell, for the John Maxwell event with John Maxwell, Adam and I went, and a couple, the McKissicks, with several other people that I know. And I've shared this before, at the last minute, I mean, and had spent, a lot of people spent a lot of money on this trip. And I was like, man, I don't think I can do it. I don't know if I can do it. And so it's funny, because when I was putting this together, I thought that's probably been such a peak, one of the largest peak environments I've ever been in, because I learned things and was around people and got to spend 7 days with John Maxwell that honestly will completely change my life. It did change my life. And so it was a peak environment, and it took, for me, for some of you guys that might not be a big deal, for me it took a peak experience to even get there. But it was a peak environment, and so it changed me. So think about if you've had a peak experience, or oh my gosh, Abby, you're reading this book? Wow, that's crazy. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. That's super cool. That's cool. So our brains are a prediction machine. We form memories to predict things of the future. And so here's some of you who were on last week will remember the story about Bill Buckner, who they lost the World Series because of the ground ball that went through his legs that he missed. And so he kind of said that, right? The story came out that 6 years before he had actually done that in an interview. And so it was crazy, because that was the first thing I thought about when I read this, because his brain actually worked in that moment as a prediction machine. I mean, unfortunately for him, it did. So personality and comfort zone can be the same thing, but this is where peak experiences and flexibility actually really come in, because you have to think about, how are you using your brain for that in a positive, or are you using your brain for that in a negative? So the last thing is that they talked about identity versus personality. So identity is the story that you tell yourself about yourself. Personality is how you show up in the world. And so I never really knew the difference, or I guess I'd never really thought about the difference between those two. But I think that for a lot of people, we may tell ourselves a different story, and that's about ourselves, and that's our identity, versus our actual personality of maybe how we show up to other people. And in the end, identity is obviously the most important. And this was fascinating to me. And I'm actually kind of a junkie for some of these, what one might call a personality test, like a Myers-Briggs or a Strength Finder. Several of you probably have done Strength Finders before. Because those tests, though, this is what this guy said, put those people into a type, if you think about it. And that's actually a $2 million industry, because for people to take a test, for it to tell them what type it puts them in. And that was just nuts to me. But anyway, he said that identity actually creates your behavior, and then your behavior actually creates your personality. So if you've ever overly assumed a label about yourself, maybe it's just something that you believed about yourself, or that you've told yourself, like he used the example of saying, if somebody says, man, I'm such an, and you guys will laugh because this is not me, man, I'm such an introvert. Like, I'm just the biggest introvert. I know I'm an introvert. I feel like I'm an introvert. And anyway, and so he said, but really they may be labeling themselves that as something negative. And so then when you do that, you become mindless about what is not true, and you believe it more and more. So he said that when you have a label on yourself and what you think your identity is, it actually leads to tunnel vision, and then you can become overly defensive about it. So then after that, you seek to confirm your bias, right? That's when you start to like look around and gather pieces of information or clues to support what you really think. Which then leads to an unimagined future self. And so this whole thing, I just want you to think about this. If you really are, if you're looking ahead, so, and this was crazy to me. He asked the question, why do we make really big, huge, important decisions on our now self, like who we are today, instead of thinking about, man, our future self is what's going to make a difference? Did I freeze again? Oh, nope, there you are. Okay, perfect. So lastly, a couple of things to wrap up the lesson. And I really tell myself every year I'm going to get back to journaling. And I start so strong, honestly. If any of you are like avid journalers, I am jealous. I'm comparing my insides to your outsides because I really want to be a strong journaler and I can't. So here's what he says. Without a future, and John said these, the hope becomes meaningless. And so he told this story about Holocaust survivors, and I was blown away by this. There were Holocaust survivors who said, if we can make it 90 more days, and they would keep track and track their days. And honestly, I'm going to butcher the story, but the percentage of the ones who said that, they would die really close to right after their 90 days versus the ones who said, we're going to make it out of this. Like, we are going to survive no matter how many days it takes. So your future will be what allows you to create your daily habits. And then your goals shouldn't come from your present personality. They should really come from your future self. So ask yourself, this was a really telling question, how much of your day is spent on doing what you really want versus being on autopilot, reliving your past, or just on autopilot in general? And that's a great question to ask yourself, honestly. I get stuck in autopilot a lot. And then this was a one, I'm big into this, but I know a lot of people who aren't. Invest money and resources into your future self. I'm a junkie for like going to conferences and reading books, and I'll buy almost anything because I like to learn that stuff. But those are what give you the peak experiences and get you moving towards your future self. So change the environment to get the right input, because it shapes your thoughts and your perspectives. And you have to be strategic about the things coming into your head. And we've talked about this before on some Wednesday mornings, but I'm crazy about what comes into my head. And actually, Adam's been laughing at me, but just over the last couple of weeks with everything going on, it is rare that you do not find me listening to some sort of like praise and worship music, because I'm only letting that into my head right now, even though I'm missing my country some days too, but I'm only letting that in my head right now, because honestly, that's it. I personally need it. And so you have to be strategic about what's coming into your head. And then strategic journaling, and John talks about this so much, about your future self. Activate yourself. I love when John says that. He always says that. You're activating yourself when you scribe, when you actually are writing that down, when you're writing down about your future self. Because whenever you're not, you're actually putting yourself in a reactive state. And so they challenged us on this webinar to ask ourselves these questions when you're journaling. Where am I now? What are my wins over the last 90 days? Because that puts you in a good endorphin state of, man, okay, here's some good wins I've had over the last 90 days, or here's some times I got to be with my family, or here's a big win that I had at work. And then what do you really want? What are some wins that you have to look forward to over the next 90 days? And then what are some wins you'd love to have 3 years from now? What does that look like for you to have wins maybe in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years? So here's your homework for the week. Hopefully you got some good notes. I don't even know what time it is, honestly. I hope I'm close. 9:25. We're good. So as a continuation of Terrell from last week, and man, Terrell, I think you're on. Thank you so much, because I have received tremendous feedback. And if you guys missed last week, I would highly encourage you to go in the group and watch the recording from last week. So in a continuation from that, there's two things. I very, very rarely ever talk about mine and Linda's podcast. However, I would love for you, if you have not already, to go listen to the Everything Life and Real Estate podcast, episode 77. We dropped it on Saturday. It's a special episode called We Stand Together. We interviewed 3 very, very special realtors in our region, and it doesn't matter if you're in real estate or not, you'll get a ton out of this episode, because, man, Terrell taught me a lot last Wednesday, and they taught me a ton on that podcast. And so I would really encourage you guys to listen to that. And then if you have not, whether you're a person of faith or not, I would really encourage you to watch Andy Stanley's message from last week called The Human Race, and you can watch it on YouTube. He actually put it on YouTube. It's probably one of the better messages I've heard over the last couple of weeks. And it's really good. I've listened to it twice. I'll probably listen to it again for the third time while I'm driving today. But it's really great. And so if you've missed that, I would encourage you to watch that, because I think we have to continue to do our part and to just keep educating and keep having difficult conversations. And I don't think it's ever going to be easy. What's up, Frankie? I don't think it's ever going to be easy, honestly. For me, it's not. However, you just learn so much more. So, and then continue writing your handwritten notes. Man, people need handwritten notes more than ever. And for those of you that have sent me one, thank you so much, because I love opening them. Adam has made so much fun of me because I used to hate to check the mail. I think I've shared that before. Who likes to check the mail? It's always like bills and junk. And now I love to check the mail. So keep sending your handwritten notes to people in your world, because it makes a big difference. And then I would love for you guys to engage in our closed Facebook group this week, because I can tell you people have texted me and said they love just like engaging and talking to other people. I know we're all seeking kind of community right now, honestly, more than ever, I feel like. So invite a friend, share a win that you have, share an aha, something that maybe throughout the week you remember from our Zooms or from our Zoom this week. And I would just love to hear, and I know everybody else would like to also. So I really appreciate you guys being on. I think we're right at time. Let me just check the chat really fast. Talisha, yes, you have what you say and believe. Very, very, very true. Yes. Actually, Blair Bishop, that's a great question. I don't drink coffee, believe it or not. I don't need caffeine. For many of you that know me, know that I can't do caffeine. But I could do that in the morning while I have water, maybe. Yes, that's probably true. Prayer journal. Yep, I love this. Okay, thank you guys so much. I want to be respectful of time. Thank you for coming back every Wednesday. Thank you for letting me be in the car today. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. See you later.